Hey, and welcome to Things Worth Learning. I'm your host, Matt Stauffer, and this is a show where a curious computer programmer, that's me, interviews fascinating people about their passions. My guest today is Taylor Poindexter, engineering manager at Spotify and co-founder of Black Code Collective. So Taylor, would you mind telling the audience a little about yourself, of whether it's your personal or your professional life?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today, Matt. And as you mentioned, I am the engineering manager for Spotify, or a engineering manager for Spotify. I'm co-founder of Black Code Collective, and I also am very passionate about whiskey. So I run a whiskey Instagram and YouTube page where I try to tell people about new whiskey cocktails or just about the spirit in general. I'm an aunt, and it's one of my favorite things in the world. Love to travel, scuba dive, and that's basically me in a nutshell.
I love it. If we'll put all the links to all the stuff that Taylor does in the show notes, but I just want to say, Woman with Whiskey on Instagram went from like, hey, this is my friend who's got a couple of random whiskey videos, to like thousands of followers and like doing cross promotional stuff with the whiskey people. Like, you really kind of rose up real quick there. That was really cool to see. You're pretty legit.
Yeah, and honestly, it only happened because of COVID. That was like one of the good things that came out of COVID. Yeah. So before COVID, every year for my birthday, I would host a whiskey tasting party and try to convert my friends as possible whiskey lovers.
Okay.
And they missed the knowledge I would give them during my birthday party. So they're like, can you just like make some videos or maybe do some Zooms? And then
I had no idea
that's
where it came from. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So it just worked out.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. It's totally delightful. And make sure all of y'all, will put all the links in the show notes, but following Taylor as Engineering Bay on Twitter and Women with Whiskey on Instagram and all these things. There's so much good stuff going on. And a quick note, Black Code Collective, if anybody's not familiar with it, could you tell us real quick what it's about?
Absolutely. So it's basically a space for Black engineers to come and gather. So they have a safe space, a place to network, ask each other questions, and try to level each other up in their careers. During normal times, we're based out of DC, but again, with COVID, like we're doing things virtually. And so that's how we're able to still connect.
Love it. Also, links to that will be in the show notes. So we had some technical difficulties today, so I'm just going to get right to it and start with our questions so we make sure we don't run out of time. Do you have any sort of life mantra or phrase or idea that you try to live your life by?
So my favorite number is 3. So these things usually come in 3 for me.
All right.
The first one is, so your net worth is your network. I genuinely believe that, while I'm not the smartest person ever, I am, good at networking, and I really take care of my network. And I feel like that has served me well. And I've also been able to serve others. The second thing is scared money don't make money. So I'd rather die with a list of failures than a bunch of regrets.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is something that my mom and my brother used to tell me in a really pivotal time of my life, was like, those that matter don't mind, and those that matter don't matter. Excuse me, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter.
That's really good. I feel like that this podcast is therapy for me every freaking week that I do one of these, because that's literally what I'm figuring out right now. I'm like, oh, when I need to make time for myself and I have to cancel a social obligation, turns out that those who mind are the ones that I shouldn't be worrying about. And those that do matter to me are like, yeah, take time for yourself. I love you and I care for you. I'm like, oh, okay. So thank you, Taylor, for reminding me of that. I love that phrase.
No, of course. And I feel like both of us are like very empathetic people, even just like making this happen, know, and I really enjoyed that. Obviously, yeah, we had some moments, but like, I really enjoyed what that brought out in each of our characters, like eventually getting here.
Yeah, you're dealing with the fact that I can hardly even talk right now and all my computer stuff fell apart today. Yes. All right. Well, I love those. I think it's funny because I've been talking about getting a tattoo to people, and what I've realized is that I want like 1 or 2 or 3 tattoos that I see every single day. So like right here or something that remind me of the things that I want to approach like life with. And I'm trying to figure out the energy, but that third one that you have there, I'm now like trying to think about like, what's the acronym of that? Those that matter don't mind. So anyway, I don't think that's going to be it, but like, I love this idea of living from this concept of like the fact that people are going to, so the first 2 were great. The first 2 are wonderful. I love them. But the third one I think is hitting me the most, because it's space for people who care about you to like, as empathetic people as maybe, I don't know about you, but like I have a natural people pleasing streak as an empathetic person, to recognize that like the people who love us are going to make space for us to care for ourselves. And in fact, that's actually what I want for us. So that's a good reminder. I appreciate that.
I completely agree.
Of course. All right. So, this podcast is about one topic you're really passionate about. We obviously have a million things we can talk about. I'll have you back another day to talk about whiskey. But right now, can you tell me about what we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. So today I wanted to talk to you about psychological safety. I feel like that was the factor that made me able to really skyrocket in my career. Before I had it, I felt like my career was kind of floundering
Hmm.
and I really lacked the confidence that I needed to actually be successful and confident in a job. But then once I got it, I really felt like I was able to like get my bearings and really take off from there. And especially now that I'm a manager, it's something that I really work hard to try to infuse into teams because I think that is a key component to a lot of teams being able to be successful.
Hmm. So when you say psychological safety, I'm being totally transparent here. This is not some BS to pretend I don't know what you're talking about. I in my emotions, I feel a feeling. I'm like, yes, I want to be psychologically safe. But in the on my brain, I don't actually fully understand. I've never heard that phrase used before in this context. So I'm really excited to hear. So assuming someone else in listening is as dumb as me about this context, can you just tell me a little about like what does psychological safety mean? Like maybe what are the either how do you define it or what does it look like to know that you are or are not psychologically safe in a particular space?
And for one, not dumb. We're all learning new things, so we're setting the
There you
psychological
go.
safety
There you
here.
go.
but,
Right. Okay.
but, but let's see. I've never looked up the Webster dictionary for it.
Hmm.
But what I actually think of it as is like a person feeling comfortable to be vulnerable in some way, shape, or form,
Mm,
and not fear retribution. So
okay.
typically on a team, that it looks like potentially being comfortable admitting that they don't know something, or
Mm,
maybe that they're going to miss a deadline, or things that can be uncomfortable to admit in a team, or can share constructive criticism with a team member,
yeah.
um, things like that.
That's amazing because that addresses so many aspects of what we try to do at Titan, but also I think the damage we try to undo from people's previous work experiences. And I would have never had like a grouping like you just described of like, oh, those were all connected to the same thing. So once again, now this is owning a company therapy. So can you, before we even talk about what it looks like to create psychological safety for people, could you give me, and you just gave a couple there, but like what are some examples of a sign that you're in a place where you're not feeling psychologically safe? And I know we talked before that we're going to talk about broader life, but maybe we're going to start in the workplace. So, in a workplace setting, could you give me a couple examples, even if you're just repeating the ones you just said, of what it looked like to not feel psychologically safe in the workforce?
I actually thought it was a really good point that you pointed to the work that you're trying to do at Titan with to undo the damage that a lot of people have encountered at other jobs.
Yeah.
Because that was actually the first sign that I was in a psychologically safe place at my last job.
Hmm.
Is that I was actually afraid to ask questions, but folks kept reminding me that like it's okay to ask questions. We're expecting you to have
Mm-hmm.
questions. You're new, and like the people that I felt were engineers that I looked up to. So before I was an engineering manager, I was a senior back end engineer. But when I started my last job, I was a mid level back end
Mm-hmm.
engineer. And so seeing people that I thought were like the best engineers I've ever worked with admit that they don't know something and
Yeah.
then tell me, like, it's okay. Like, I don't know a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of stuff. I expect you not to know a bunch of stuff, and continuing to work with me to make sure that I felt comfortable to ask questions when I had them. So that was a good sign that I was in a place that I was psychologically safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I know that, like, especially in certain companies on teams and stuff like that, things are going to happen that will make you feel not psychologically safe sometimes. But then having people step in those moments and me
Mm.
feeling like I don't have to defend myself. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm at this job. This person says something in this meeting that I don't agree with, and I feel uncomfortable. But one of my team members or my manager noticed that,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sticking up for me, and so like that makes me feel psychologically safe, and ups my confidence that this person has my back. So things like that.
That and that makes a ton of sense that it's not being protected from anything negative happening, but it is a place where it is made clear, especially by people in leadership, that like these are things that won't be tolerated or whatever. That's cool. Um, so one of the things you gave as an example is feeling like you can admit that you don't know something. So when we talk about that psychological safety, I think especially in the workflows, there's probably safety from what? And you said you can share these things without fear of retribution. I imagine that the people who are causing their employees to feel psychologically unsafe are not doing so intentionally. This retribution, like let's say that if I were to share, I didn't know how to do this, and then my boss like kind of came at me, or one of the seniors came at me in a certain way. Do you have a sense for what well-intentioned but harmful desire kind of leads to people making other people feel psychologically unsafe that once they become aware of, maybe they can stop doing? Is that like a
Ooh,
reasonable thing that you can think through?
That is a good question. Let's see, because the thing that I'm thinking of is that usually when I see that type of aggression exhibited when somebody doesn't know or admits they don't know something, it comes from that old school way of managing or like keeping a team in line where you like, crack the whip or whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess I'm trying to, mm,
And I mean, maybe that's it, right? Maybe it's this is what I've been taught and modeled that this is what managing looks like, and that's
yeah,
just it, right?
yeah. And I'm
Mm.
trying to think of like well-intentioned folks that maybe doing things to make somebody feel psychologically unsafe and they may not realize it. But I think for those situations, they can be obviously really nuanced, but that's where the communication piece comes in. So even
Mm-hmm.
asking my team, how do you like to be managed or how do you like to be communicated with? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to proactively ask that, but I realized that if I hadn't asked that in certain situations, I could have made them feel unsafe without even realizing it. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of the people I know that I used to work with is actually very triggered by like management, just be like, "Hey, can I talk to you really quick?" And it's it's not that it's always something bad, but
Yeah.
that can make them worry. But that's because of past traumas that they've had in
Yes.
the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
No, that's great. And for anybody who's thinking about that particular thing, I've talked to people about that particular example, and they say, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" Say, "Hey, can I talk to you about something? Don't worry, it's not a problem." Or, "Hey, can I talk to you about XYZ in 5 minutes or whatever?" So like, it's just understanding those fears. And so that's one of the things that was kind of you were talking about is what safety from what? And you said retribution. And so like in that particular moment, that person is afraid that you're getting called in to have your bad performance discussed, or afraid that you're going to get fired, or afraid you're going to get demoted. And so a little bit of empathy there, saying, what would it be like for me to get that message? How can I both ask for the meeting and also address that concern in the way that I asked for it? That makes a ton of sense. So talking from the perspective of an engineering manager, one of the things you said was you were able to go from feeling psychologically unsafe to being, as a worker, feeling psychologically safe, and now being a manager trying to create spaces for psychological safety. Not everybody who's listening is in a management perspective, so I actually don't want to go the whole way down the management route right now. I imagine, both based on my experiences and also some things you said, that you don't have to be a leader necessarily to do things that help other people feel psychologically safe or unsafe. As a general member of a team, whether it's interacting with another person who's at your same level or especially somebody who's a little bit more junior than you are, what are some steps or approaches or tools or tactics that you think are going to be helpful for us to consider as we're trying to ensure that the people around us feel safe psychologically at the workforce?
Yeah, I typically just lean into like if I see something to actually say something. So whether it's like again noticing that a coworker feels uncomfortable in a meeting
Mm-hmm.
with the way somebody is speaking with them, or even little things. And I know this is harder to do when we're all remote. But if I notice a fellow teammate, it may not be acting like themselves or anything like that, or like
Mm-hmm.
they just seem a little off. Like not trying to get into their business or anything, but just kind of just like, hey, not trying to get into your business, but like if you need anything, I'm here for you. And I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
has done like a lot of good as far as laying the foundation and letting them know that I care, and that a different way of letting them know that I like have their back.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that served me well.
Yeah. Have you noticed that there are any circumstances or interpersonal dynamics or cultural differences where you're like, if this particular thing is at play, there's a very good chance that there's going to be a psychological safety issue here that we need to address? Like, is it more likely with juniors? Is it more likely with cross-cultural communication or cross-gender communication, or more likely with anything else? Any particular, like, are there settings where you're like, that's a setting where I want to keep my radar on, basically?
I definitely think that there are certain things that call it out more. Being more junior can be one, but then also being a minority on a team can also be one. So I know we
Mm-hmm.
talked about the retribution piece, but then kind of in line with that, especially as like a minority, as a woman or a black person or both, I've been sometimes like when I felt like not only is this person lashing out at me in front of people,
Mm-hmm.
that's uncomfortable, but then I also feel like, I'm representing a larger group
Mm-hmm.
as the only minority here, and so that added pressure on those
Mm-hmm.
things can really feel
Mm-hmm.
unbearable. Um, and I'm trying to think and being junior, especially when you haven't had that foundation set. So in line with your previous question, I always try to really make sure that, I let everybody on the team, but especially juniors, know that they can ask me questions and I'm here to support them. And
Hmm.
these things are natural, and really lean into that thing that my old manager did in letting them know I don't know everything. I'm a senior software engineer, I'm an engineering
Hmm.
manager. I'm figuring it out like you are, especially in the tech field. We're most of the time always still learning and trying to push forward, and that's okay.
Yeah. One of the things that we've learned at Titan very quickly is that giving an apprentice the opportunity to show that they know something that a lead doesn't has been really foundational that way, because they're like, wait a minute, you mean I know this particular thing and you don't? And it's kind of like an amplified version of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I love
have
that.
you have you found any? I know I'm the one who just said that, but have you found any contexts or circumstances in which you have the ability to like intentionally create those dynamics, whether it's the apprentice or the junior knowing more, or are there intentional steps that you can take or practices that ensure that it's a regular practice for more senior people to admit their shortcomings? Is it more just like each person just needs to learn that, or are there systemic structural things that we can do that help it be more natural for people?
I just try to set that vibe, like as a manager on the team. Like when
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people ask me questions, and to this day, I'm like, you know what? I have no clue, but I'm gonna, I'm gonna,
I'm gonna
I'm gonna,
Google it and I'll get back
yeah,
to you.
yeah, I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah.
Or like, especially if like people that maybe more introverted or maybe more
Mm-hmm.
junior on the team, if they do actually speak up and ask questions and stuff like that, I very much support that and try to make sure that they know that their contributions are very valued, even if they are the most junior person or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot on the team. Like, we all bring something to this team. That's why you're here. And so I just try to reinforce that in them every day.
Yeah. Um, I know that we're kind of focusing this on the perspective of the workforce, and I do want to stay there for a second, but I just want to put a reminder in both of our brains. This is triggering, or this is reminding me a lot of your third item of who are the people who matter, and the people who are the people who make me feel safe to be able to say I don't have the spoons today to do this social outing that we had planned. um, my fear of the retribution of their anger, that you're going to dump on me, versus the people who don't make me have that fear. There's a psychological safety element there as well. I know we're going to get there. I do want to ask you about workforce stuff, but I just appreciate the ties that are running through the various things that you've said today. So,
Yeah,
okay,
no, I
engineering
completely agree.
manager. Engineering manager. I'm sorry, I said that because I know I would forget otherwise.
Good.
So as you are an engineering manager and you're trying to create a very intentional space, one of the things you said was, I want to go ask every single one of my employees that, or one of my directs, like how they like to be managed. And I want to be really transparent that at times when I've heard people talk about managing the way you manage, I've felt overwhelmed and like I'm not a good manager, because I have a hard time being as intentional as you are. And it's okay, I know that I'm a good manager, but I felt this way. So I'm hoping to address anybody else who feels that same way. I have a hard time being as intentional as you are, of looking at each person and asking, what do you want? And then remembering what they want in every single setting. And so one of the things that I've found is, while I like to do that, what is most helpful for me is finding things that I can just say, I'm going to do this for everybody all the time. And then if I contextualize a little bit for each person, good on me, but at least I want to set up good kind of patterns and practices. So if there's a new engineering manager here listening to this and they say, wow, I love this idea and I don't know what it looks like to create psychological safety. So far, they've heard you say, share that you don't always know what's right. If you don't always know the answer, also speak up if you ever see a dynamic happening that you think is not healthy. Can you talk about that one? And then are there any other tips or tricks you'd have for them? But I think that we should dig a little bit more in what is the value of speaking up when you see a negative thing happening, and what is the cost if you don't, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And before we dive into that kind of tied to this, I know that it can be exhausting. I will admit, like, especially as a human being, like trying to personalize all these management things for each person on my team can be a lot. So one thing I really try to lean into that I can apply across the board is constantly asking the team, like either in retrospectives or in our one-on-ones, like, is there anything specifically that I can do to make your life easier?
Mm,
And then
mm-hmm,
doing my very best to make sure that that thing happens. So at the very least, they know that, like, this person cares about, my life
mm-hmm.
being easier here at this job,
That's
and
good.
she's actually going to do it.
Yeah.
And
Even if
and
you
so
don't
that
know it always proactively, you're like, well, I didn't think of that. I believe there's a world in which I could think of those things, but at least I asked and responded to their request, right? Like it's at least like setting up a practice of what can I do? What can I do? And then doing it. Yeah, that makes a
Yep.
ton of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Building up that street cred with the person.
Yeah.
Um, and then in line with like speaking up when you see something, I will admit like I don't mind speaking up in the situation and inserting myself in. I'm not like a confrontational person, but I don't mind confrontation if it happens.
Hmm.
But not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
So I will say too, it doesn't actually have to be inserting yourself in that moment. It could just be maybe checking with that person afterwards or like having their back if they do want to talk with somebody or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to acknowledge that we're also all a bit different, but even just empathizing with them can help along a lot. Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I think that there's probably I think off the top of my head, there's three values to speaking up. One of them is making the person know that they're heard and understood and supported. The next one is helping the offender know that they are doing something that they probably aren't intentionally. Hopefully, we assume that everyone's not being a jerk on purpose, right? And again, that can also happen publicly or it can happen, privately later. And then the third one I think is setting the stage for the rest of the people, saying that's not how we behave, right? And so I was curious, can you talk a little bit more about like what it looks like to create a culture by what you say publicly? Like how, let's say that I hear what you just said and I take it as permission to never speak up again about anything publicly and always just go talk directly to that person. Tell me a little bit about what we're losing if I never say anything publicly.
That is true. So by not speaking up publicly, you definitely, I don't want to say like backdoor. I feel like it's a lot less effective. So I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like setting the tone publicly. I was thinking in that case, like more as a maybe like an individual contributor, but especially as managers, I feel like it is
Yeah.
so important to be, direct and, obviously polite, but direct about like what we expect from our people.
Mm-hmm.
So as a leader, even if you don't do it in the moment, we're all human. Maybe you like, I don't know, just didn't speak up in that moment.
Yeah.
That needs to be addressed publicly to actually make sure that it's an effective change and doesn't like ripple out, behind
Mm-hmm.
scenes.
I love the clarification there because I think it's very different as a member of a team or a community versus a leader. Totally. So, like, as a member, you don't always have the agency, or it may not always be appropriate for you to speak out and correct somebody, right? As a manager, you also still have to be nuanced because there's some people, if you correct them publicly, they're just going to shut down. So, there's definitely nuance about it, but some way of communicating. And this is something that just doesn't happen at Titan. It also happens in the Laravel community. Like, I'm seen as a leader in the Laravel community, and so I speak out when people are mistreating other people in the Laravel community on Twitter. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. And sometimes people are like, oh, you're just coming in here and white knighting. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to make sure that people know that it is not acceptable to interact with other people that way. And I want it to be seen that people with leadership agency are going to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. And I think for anyone else to hear, like, we can be afraid of being seen as like a crusader or social justice warrior or whatever, whether in the workplace, whatever else. But when that happens, it is showing people that it is not acceptable to be unkind and mistreat people, even if you're doing it accidentally. And so there is like an empathy to the offender. There's an empathy to the recipient of the difficulty. There's a cultural definition. There's so many aspects of this that are going on, and it's very nuanced for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that, and I know, again, like you said, it's nuanced, but even being able to speak up against somebody who is like maybe more of a leader or whatnot actually says a lot for psychological safety too, I feel like. Because at my
Mm,
last job, I know Spotify's a lot bigger than like my last job. It was a startup, but I would, and he loved it, but I would like publicly disagree with the CEO, like in all
mm-hmm.
hands. And we'd have a debate about it. And so, like, at
Yeah,
first it was scary, but
yeah.
it's like, no, this is great. And I feel like it helped other people realize that, like, oh no, he really wants to hear what we have to say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I feel like that makes a huge difference in a company too.
And that's cool because you had developed the rapport with him to be able to do that, and that allowed future people who came along to now learn this is an acceptable way of communicating. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. At Titan, we have an apprenticeship program, and as the company has gotten bigger, I have had to let go of more and more things that I was directly managing because I just can't. And it was like the last thing I had held on to that I didn't want to let go of. And I just realized over the last couple of months and through some conversations with folks that I need to let go of it and let other people manage it. And one of the things that happened was by allowing other people to manage the apprenticeship program, that means they need to be able to come to me and say, you're tasking apprentices incorrectly for what they need or whatever, and come at me with an attitude that I'm, as an owner of a company, I'm just kind of like, who are you to talk to me like that? And then I go, wait a minute, this is exactly what I'm asking for. So even as someone who I think of myself as the person who does this in the industry and does this at my company, now finding myself in a place where I'm like, wow, I need to like watch myself. So, to owners, to CEOs, to higher level people, it can be effort and difficult, and it require a realignment. Even if we think of ourselves as like, comfortable and safe people, you still have to like keep asking yourself that, like, where are my feelings from here coming from? And what does it look like for me in this moment to swallow my ego and actually like help people feel safe?
Totally.
You're new in engineering management. Have you had any of those moments yet? Or are you still so close to not being in a management position that you're like, no, I'm one of the people right now, like,
No, I will say the thing that I feel like I've realized, especially over the pandemic, and being a manager, is that like I'm a human. Not that I ever questioned I was a human or anything like that, but I've
right.
always like, been like, oh, I love management, and I do.
Yeah.
But I feel like in the pandemic, I've been faced with new challenges that like I have to like check my ego, have to check my emotions, and make sure that
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm putting all that stuff aside and trying to be the best manager that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually help people. I know that sometimes people hear the word psychological safety and they view it as like, the soft skill fluff or whatnot.
Right.
But I genuinely believe, like, imagine if your employees didn't feel safe to come to you and say, like, actually, this apprenticeship is like not being as effective as it could be, and the
Mm-hmm.
inefficiencies continued. But the fact that they felt that they could come to you with constructive criticism and you can nip it in the bud right then,
Yeah.
it makes a world of freaking difference, and
Yeah.
actually enables teams to be even more effective.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. All right, so we've talked a lot about psychological safety in the workforce, and I was curious if we could kind of dive a little bit into psychological safety in normal life outside of the workforce a little bit. One of the things you said was just talking about being able to share, like if I was translating it to a non-work setting, being able to share things that I felt like I might not know the way I should, or I might not have a handle on, or I might not be able to say it in a way that is what the other person expects of me without fearing their retribution. Can you tell me a little bit about what psychological safety in either friendships or family relationships or anything like that looks like in general? And then also, like, where does that lead you? Does that lead you to want to talk about how to be a good friend or how to identify good friends? So first of all, just what does psychological safety in relationships or family relationships or communities look like? And what does that kind of make you want to talk more about from there?
That's a good question because I have always applied it to like the workforce, but like as you asked the question, I was thinking especially I know I keep bringing COVID up. I'm sorry, but like over the
No.
past over the past 2 years, I feel like I've really been trying to pour energy into people, into things that I feel like pour back into me, and so I've been doing a lot of reflecting and a lot of journaling on that. And similar to psychological safety in the workforce, I think it's being able to be vulnerable enough to admit that you're not okay, or that
Mm-hmm.
you may not have, like you said, the spoons to be able to do something, even if you feel like you may be letting a loved one down.
Mm-hmm.
um and not fearing that. So I also have like a people pleasing bone in my body. um and so like I getting more comfortable with like, these people know me well enough. They know that like,
Mm-hmm.
I try to stick to my commitments, and I feel safe enough to admit to them like I'm not doing okay. I don't
Yeah.
even know what I need to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And having them support me in the best way that they know how. Or even sometimes like, I don't know if you've ever needed to vent to a loved one, but
Mm-hmm.
you may not even want to hear their opinions. You may just
Yep.
need to like get it off your chest. So
Yeah. Don't
I've
don't
had
fix it for me. Just listen, please.
just listen to me.
Yep.
But I've had some people not like the fact that sometimes I just like, hey, I really need to vent, but like I don't want any opinions right now, to kind of like
Mm-hmm.
let them know what I need. They
Yeah.
feel like, that's like bossy, or like you're coming to me, but you're
Mm-hmm.
making, and to me, it's kind of just like you said, like if you cared about me, then I would think that you would be able to put that aside because you can tell that like I'm in need, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
typically not the type of person to come to you and admit that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
So people giving you the space to be vulnerable, in whatever shape form that may come in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brings up an idea that I've been rolling around, which is as extroverts, as empathetic people, as we have a lot of friends. I imagine this to be true about you, but when you are always the one who's providing in the relationship, it's very easy to have a friendship. When you have something to require from them or to request from them, I feel like that's when you're really kind of figuring out who the real ones are. And And I love what you said, because it's like you keep telling the same story, which is, again, speaking straight to my soul, which is, when I need something from you, which I don't normally do, when I need to vent, which I don't normally do, when I need you to actually kind of control your response and just listen to me, when I need to bail on this obligation, when I need to be vulnerable and share something that's embarrassing to me, are you a person who makes me feel like I'm okay and I'm safe, and I get really emotional about how grateful I am for you? Or do you make me feel judged, and do you make me feel like I'm a bad person for not being able to continue to just invest in you nonstop? And that doesn't mean those are bad people. It just means that's a different kind of relationship, and you got to kind of keep it a little bit more at arm's length. And
A
that makes a lot of
freaking
sense.
man. And just sometimes, like you said, like you're kind of alluding to, just knowing, like you said, not that they're necessarily bad people, but then also knowing that about the relationship
Mm-hmm.
and handling it accordingly, I think is really important. And kind of how we both were talking about, like, being the friend that may not ask for help a lot. I feel like something I've
Mm-hmm.
been reflecting on the last couple of months. Actually saw a tweet. I love Twitter. But but somebody was like, "We're always emphasizing check on your strong friends, check on your strong friends." But what I want strong friends to actually do is to actually let folks know when they're not well, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where that psychological safety piece comes in. But then also
Mm-hmm.
on us strong folks to be, when you have that psychological safety, just admitting that instead of just like saying you're okay and pivoting back to like taking care of that person just because that's our
Mm-hmm.
habit.
Yeah. It's a joy when you discover someone who you weren't sure the depth of your relationship you haven't experienced, and you're like, oh, this is someone who I'm really safe with. Like, I know that I've multiple times had to ask you to make adjustments around this, and each time I was like, oh, we're cool like that, like, and that's a really valuable thing, because there's people who I thought I knew way better than I knew you, who have been very inflexible with stuff. And so I'm like, okay, like, as we grow, as we go through different situations, as we hit global pandemics, as we go through a divorce, as our computers fall apart, as we change jobs, whatever, each of these are moments where we see kind of where are we receiving what we need to be receiving from people, where are the spaces that we're safe. And I know people kind of like tease about this idea of safe space, but it comes from a very good place. Like, it's a place of safety where I don't have to have all my shit together, right? Like, I don't have to know all the answers, whether those programming answers or that's what the hell am I doing in my life answers, right? Like, you can be a person, to your friends with whom they can just bring all their shit to you, and you can just say, cool, like, I love you, I support you, or your family members, right? Um, I've had a lot of
Hell yeah.
friends. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying hell yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of friends lately talk about their experiences of coming out through LGBTQ or whatever else, of something that they were worried about their family not being supportive of. And the number one value I've heard from those who had a positive experience was the experience of, they love me no matter what, right? I felt like I was telling something that was going to disappoint them because they're really religious or whatever else. And I just believed that no matter what I said, they would love me and support me. And that sounds really simple, but I feel like it's seeming to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, that's kind of one of the underlying aspects of psychological safety, is not having to believe that you have to perform a particular way or seem a particular way, but no matter who or what you are, you're still good. Is that a good read,
Yes.
that's kind of okay? That's
Freaking
cool.
perfect. And kind of the same thing I was thinking. That was so perfect. And honestly, like you were saying that like I was willing to be flexible, but also on my end, like as somebody who feels like they need to be a perfectionist all the time,
Mm.
when the first time we tried to meet and I didn't have my audio or my mic set up, you could have easily brought me to my knees because I was like panicking and like, other stuff, but you were like super chill and just like, you know what, it's fine, and you were helpful. And like you said, then I got to the point where it's like, oh no, me and Matt, we're here. We got
Yeah.
this. um
Yeah.
but then it putting me at ease and knowing that like
Mm.
similar to how you exactly what you were saying, no matter what, we're good. Like I am
Yeah.
not less because I messed up the audio or didn't. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
put it perfectly.
Yeah, one of the other guests showed up, and he was like, "Hey, so I'm in trouble with my family because I scheduled a family dinner, or I scheduled this podcast recording with you at the same time my family was like in town to have dinner." I'm like, "Why are you on this call with me right now?" And but we've all had experiences with people where that's not the response. They're like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool. Well, let's get to it, right?" And this is not
Yep.
because I'm a great person or you're a great person. It's just like, if we have the perspective of treating a person as a person more than what we need from them. And that's true in the relational context, that's true in the work context. And I understand that someone can say like, well, this is very woo woo, like of course, like, we're all family or whatever, but like we still need people to do their work. So I guess I know I'm going back to the work context here. How do you balance the desire for each person to be completely known and heard and safe as the person they are at work, and also recognizing that this is not some like we're going to pretend to be a family when we're not dynamic. And in the end, someone still needs to produce and they still need to perform. As a manager, what do you think your main kind of approach is to both give them psychologically safety and also to be able to be candid about when there is an actual problem? Like, how do you have the balance between those?
Yeah, and so the main thing I try to emphasize is that, like, again, we're all working it out, so I'm expecting for there to be issues, but then also leaning into giving them constructive criticism like as soon as possible. I know some
Mm-hmm.
managers like try to say it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, like no issue. But when I do give them constructive criticism, which I try to do often, like I still point out the positives in them. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh, you suck so bad and I hate that how you implemented this last ticket. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I know that you're working really hard on this ticket and I know it's taking longer than usual, and the first thing I try to do is like, is there anything that I'm not privy to that you feel like is
Mm-hmm.
keeping you from to
That's
be
good.
keeping able to produce?
Yeah.
If they say no, it's kind of just like, okay, well, let's try to identify some ways that we can help you. Like, do you need to pay a program and yada yada yada? And instead of it being like a blame thing or like
Mm-hmm.
you're taking forever on this ticket, it's like, how
What
can
can we
we,
do? Yes. I love
yeah,
that.
to make this work? And
That's
so
so
like,
good.
even when I'm delivering them constructive criticism, they don't feel like this is all on me. This is like this is a
Mm-hmm.
us thing.
And I love the fact that you also said like the first thing you ask is there something I don't know? Because again, as a manager, it can be tempting to say, I know everything. They should have done this. They didn't do it. They're in trouble. And now this is a power dynamic here. And your first phrase is there something that I don't know? Is there an ignorance on my part that is allowing me to misunderstand the situation? And you're giving them agency. And if they say no, I found that people are much more receptive to that feedback because if they're recognizing that they made a mistake, but the first thing they did was have agency to clear up the communication, they're recognizing that you're not coming in like some browbeating asshole being like, you screwed up. You're like, no, tell me what's going on. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing I also want to highlight about what you just said was communicating early and often. The fear of conflict, I think, or maybe some mistaken ideas around management or something, leaves people constantly in fear that they're gonna like the shoe's gonna drop when there's been something that's been going on all along. And I think that's where the fear of like, can I talk to you about something comes from? Because we have this expectation that must be set in something of people being like, hey, I've been upset with you for screwing this up for a really long time and now I'm finally going to tell you. The amount of safety that comes from being able to tell my employees if there was a problem, you'd already know about it. And that's kind of what you just said. If you're communicating early often, I feel like you could just be like, I don't have to be anxious if Taylor's upset with me about this because I know Taylor would have already brought it up to me. I feel like that can go a really long way to giving people some just peace.
Absolutely. Or I even try to do like random one-on-ones, like with my team, like when nothing's wrong, or like, just kind of like, hey, can we hop on a call really quick? And I have something to talk to them about. But like, they're
Yeah.
like, sometimes she just wants to hop on to talk about positive things. So it's not like
Yes.
anytime Taylor wants a
It's not
random
always this.
one-on-one, yeah, it's not always bad.
Right. I like that. So I know we're running short on time. So before we get to our last question, is there anything about this topic that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get a chance to get to?
Ooh, I think we hit on most of it. I can't think of anything else.
Okay. So the last question is, what insight or support did you receive or need when you were younger that you hope more people will give to others?
I kind of touched on it in the interview, but the first thing
Mm-hmm.
is like engineers I admired or people I admired admitting that they don't know things, so that
Mm-hmm.
that kind of normalized the fact that there's so many things that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there are jobs out there that will make you feel empowered and cared
Mm-hmm.
for. So if you're in that place, I'm not saying it's always easy. I know you have to strategize, and interviewing sucks, but there are there are places there where you will feel psychologically safe and empowered, especially as like minorities. I wish I had known that sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I too often I've been told that like all jobs suck. It's just kind of what it is. Suck it
Yeah.
up until you're 60. But now
Right.
that I've had two jobs where I feel so empowered, I'm like, okay, I wish I had done this from the get go. Um, and the last one is that like soft skills are just as important as technical
Mm-hmm.
skills.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes more important because they're harder to teach,
Mm-hmm.
especially if somebody isn't interested in learning them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. We talk about
those are
that.
the three things.
Those are really good. We talk about that a lot in hiring. Like, I can teach you how to code. I can't teach you how to have integrity. I can't teach you how to have empathy. I can't teach you those things. I mean, I can try, but it's not the same.
Yeah,
So
it's not the same.
that's really good. Um, there was one other thing I wanted to share. I don't know if this is going to be relevant at all, but one of the things that I remember you gaining a lot of prominence for a while back on Twitter was when you started talking about, hey, I'm leaving my job. I'm going to take X months off of and just kind of live off of my savings. And I'm going to make this much money at my next job. And I think that you had what felt like audacity to a lot of people to make a dream for what an ideal role would look like. And it was, the pay was the one that was the most, like kind of probably dramatic to people, only because you knew one thing y'all may not know about Taylor, she also is a big advocate for salary transparency and has done a whole bunch of big Twitter threads and Google spreadsheets, stuff like that. So she knows what she's worth in a way that a lot of us don't. And so when she's like, here's what I'm going to make, like, you get a lot of people who are like, how dare you expect that, which exposed a lot of their issues. We won't talk about that. But I'm curious, as you talk about transparency and you talk about psychological safety, you went out there and did something that I think would make me feel very unsafe. Like I talk about depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation and ADHD and all that kind of stuff on my, podcasts and stuff like that. It makes me feel very unsafe. And I do it because I think it's helpful for people. It seems to me like the experiences you had there, talking about your dreams, talking about salaries, talking about these things, are things that could very inherently open you up to a lot of abuse. How did you do that and still stay like healthy and safe? Is it a friend community? Is it intentional decisions you made? Like, what does it look like for you to be so vulnerable on the internet with a whole bunch of tech bros coming after you and like not lose your mind, basically?
Honestly, it's y'all. I put it out there, and I know that there are going to be some jerks, but then in large numbers, there's going to be a crap ton of people that are supporting me and cheering me on and helping me along the way. And so also, in addition to that, hopefully I'm able to be a good example for somebody else. Like, some other people have let me know, like, holy shit, I saw that tweet and realized that I'm way underpaid. And so, like, dozens of people have reached out to me and it's like, hey, I got a new job. Thanks for like putting yourself out there. And so
I
like
love it.
at the end of the day, even if it's just a couple of dozen people that end up getting better jobs, like, it's worth it, because I know I got my squad, my Twitter squad, my friends and everything like that to support me, and y'all are what it's all about.
I like it. Yeah, you do have a crew of people. If someone says some stuff, you got a crew of people who are going to go after them. Yes. Yeah, I had one moment a couple of summers ago where it was a very not positive and kind of traumatic experience of somebody threatening me. And I was like, normally I feel like I'm ready to go to bat, but this guy knows where I live and he literally sent a video physically threatening me. I don't feel like I have the ability to respond as right now, and I didn't need to, because like you're talking about, I had a crew of people and they handled it, and there was a response video and there was people, and I just sat off Twitter all day long, and I felt very protected and cared for in that moment. So I empathize very much with what you're talking about. When you got that crew, you don't have to be alone in those experiences. So anyway, thanks for sharing that.
In a weird way, it's like more psychological safety. I know it's not safe to have the jerks come after us, but then I feel safe again.
But then when you see how people respond, yes, absolutely. Yeah, you feel more safe once you realize that safety net you had around you that you didn't see until it was needed.
Yep.
That's cool.
My invisible cloak.
I love it. Oh, nerd. Okay, so if people think you're amazing, how can they follow you? How can they support you? How can they learn more about what you're doing?
Oh yeah. So on Twitter, it's engineering_bay. And then on Instagram, if you're into whiskey, I'm Woman with Whiskey on Instagram.
I love it. And we'll put those in the show notes. And if they're like, oh my God, I'm a multi-billionaire and I love everything she's doing and I want to donate to some cause that she cares about, where should they go donate their money?
Ooh, blackcocollective.com.
There we go. Might have been intentionally leading in that direction. I love it. Awesome.
Oh,
well,
man.
Taylor, this was so much freaking fun. I really appreciate you taking time, being flexible, and sharing all that you learned with us.
Likewise, I appreciate you so much, Matt.
Awesome. And to the rest of you, until next time, be good to each other.
Bye-bye.